So here I'm meeting with Ario and Armin, and just before we started recording, I asked Ario to introduce himself, and he did. And as nicely as I could say it, I thought his presentation of himself could be improved a little bit. So after this call is over, I'm going to send to both Armin and Ario how to do an elevator pitch for yourself, right? I mean, we know how to do elevator pitches for businesses and for real estate projects, et cetera, but it's harder to do that for yourself. My American clients have no problem blowing their own horn. You know, I'm the greatest. You know, Muhammad Ali said, I'm the greatest boxer ever. You know, Americans are very much about being the greatest, obviously. I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but they certainly believe it. But my Canadian clients, my Australian clients, my clients in Scandinavia and in England, they're a little bit more shy about that. So I'm going to send it to you. You guys are going to record your elevator pitches, personal elevator pitches on YouTube, unlisted, and then I'm going to review them and critique them. All right, that's enough of that. So Armin sent me a list of questions, which is so long, it'll probably take 6 or 8 hours to get through it. We're not doing a 6 or 8 hour recording here, it'd be sort of 90 to 120 minutes today. And the first question that was, how do you find sites and how do you find corporate tenants? Because the boys are really interested in commercial real estate. And so that's a really interesting challenge. And I want to show you one that I just finished doing with another coaching client of mine. And this is actually in Texas. Whoops. Do you guys know LoopNet at all? Armin, you're muted.
There it is. I use it for appraisal business as well. So yeah. I have access to it and subscribe to it and all that.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay. So you guys are familiar, at least Armin is. Ario, do you know LoopNet?
Yes, I think so. It should be very similar to the I'm forgetting the name, but the blue version. I mean, can you
CoStar? Yeah, I mean CoStar. Yeah,
it's
the same thing.
There's another one which is called Crexi. Do you guys know Crexi?
Crexi, I've heard of it. I just haven't used it. It's usually in the States.
You can see the URL here, Crexi.com. Yep. And of course, you know, loopnet.com, and there's lots of others. But so this is an example. One of my clients really likes the mini contractor yards model. You guys are familiar with that?
Yeah.
Ario, do you know what that is, the mini contractor yards?
Well, let's go over it again. I'm not sure if I'm thinking
not to worry. I want to make sure I'm not repeating myself. So what we did, and this was a few weeks ago, was he's based in Miami, but he likes Texas for the contractor yards business. And so you can go to LoopNet, and you can go to Crexi, and you can go to CoStar, and you can use their filters. And even if you don't have a subscription, you can still use it. Although there are more functions if you're a paying customer. So here we put in Texas for sale. He's looking for industrial land. His budget was $850,000 for the land. And he was looking for buildings that are about 10,000 square feet. And so when you do that, I mean, look at the number of properties that come up, right? That are available for sale, that are under $850,000, that have a building that's under 10,000 square feet. And, you know, I don't know how many there are. There's probably 100 or 150 properties that are available in Texas right now to buy. One of the things that I would caution you guys on, when you decide what kind of a real estate business model it is that you want to pursue, don't think that you can go on any of these sites, MLS or realtor.com or whatever it might be. Don't think you can go on any of these sites and find exactly what you're looking for in 5 or 10 minutes. Most people, when they do a Google search, I mean, how long do you think most people spend on a Google search? Probably less than maybe a few dozen seconds. Would that be believable? I think so. So one of the things I do when I'm looking for property personally is I assign that to a researcher who works with me, and she happens to be my wife. And her name is Dawn. like the sun rising. And Dawn is a trained biosciences researcher, and she's extremely patient. And she will spend hours and hours, days or weeks looking for a property that suits our particular needs. Okay, you guys thinking that it's going to be easy, because it's not. All right, so you have to be patient, and you have to do the research, and you have to look at sometimes as many as 50 or even 100 different properties before you find the one that you think you might buy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So let me show you on Crexy. You can do the same thing. And this is another client of mine. And I think these guys are in South Carolina, and they're looking at, again, they like the industrial sector, they like the contractor yards model, and they did a very similar search. And here's a sort of a typical property. It's 4,000 square feet. It's priced at $450,000 US. It's been on the market for 97 days. And that's important as well. So, Armin, you would know that one of the key variables in terms of buying property and being intelligent about it is DOM, days on market, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what we tend to look for is properties where we have what I would consider a willing seller. Right. Okay. And one of the ways that you might find that is when you're looking at DOM that's not, 5 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. There are properties on Crexy and on LoopNet and other sources and MLS that have been on for sale for 400 days. And those generally are motivated sellers.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll show you then what happened next. Okay, so everything I show you guys in the coaching world and everything you share with me is confidential. That's why the videos go on YouTube, but they're unlisted. All right, so I want to show you a typical way that we would analyze a prospective purchase. You guys okay with that?
Yep.
All right. So it would be very similar to the stuff that you're already doing, Armin, in terms of appraisals. But here is a site. In fact, it's been tied up at 510 Northwest Mustang Drive in Andrews in Texas. So that's where I think they filmed the series Friday Night Lights, if you know anything about football. So my client purchased it for $675,000, just over 3 acres. There'll be some closing costs, but we don't know what those are yet. He budgeted $2,000 for legals, budgeted another $500 for title insurance, some disbursements, probably be just under $680,000, to purchase. And my client will put up 50% of that as equity. And the reason for that, and again, I probably don't have to tell Armin this, is that financing for commercial properties in the States and Canada has become more difficult. So you're not going to see 80%, at least in my experience, you're not going to see 80% loan to value. You might not even see 65% loan to value. In this case, my client, we're budgeting that he has to come up with 50% of the equity, 50% of the closing costs, right, himself in cash. So that means he has to come up with about $340,000. Now, I think I have it open here. This is the property that he ended up buying. And you can sort of see it here. It's about 3 acres. It has an existing warehouse space here, which is over 7,000 square feet. And then it has quite an area here, which he will divide up Ario into small contractor yards. So it means a local contractor there could get a workshop that might be, say, 1,500 square feet, and he could get a small yard where he could put his equipment, his loader, his dozer, whatever it might be, excavator, and store some inventory too. That's the model here. It's a wonderful model, and it's been very successful. Yeah. So yeah. This is the property that he put an offer in, and it was accepted. And look at this. Can you read that on the screen?
410 days DOM. I'm guessing that's what it is.
Correct. And when the reason we picked Texas is oil prices go up and down. You know, I mean, when they're down, everybody wants to commit suicide, and when they're up, everybody's happy and drinking lots of beer and shooting off their guns too. They got guns everywhere.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so it is a good time to buy right now if you have some cash. And this particular client, who's based in Miami, has lots of cash, you know, and that's it. So let's go back to the spreadsheet. So where is it here? All right. So his cost to purchase is about $680,000. He does not need any gravel because it's already been gravelled. So the cost for gravel here is zero. Gravel is quite expensive, but in his case, it's an advantage. This place is already ready for big trucks. Then he's going to put up lots of fencing. He's going to do some renovations of the existing building so he can create 1,200 and 1,500 square foot workshops. He's got a budget of 12% for contingencies. This I will talk about in a minute. These are mini workshops, which I'll show you in a second. He's got some marketing costs. Total is about $97,000. So his entire budget is about $1 million. He's going to see if he can do 65% loan to value financing. But if not, he'll go back to 50% and just put half of it up in cash. So that's the cost side of this equation. Now let's look at some of the revenues and what is his cap rate and all this good stuff that Armin would understand from his appraisals. But before I do that, what I'll show you is some pictures, if I could find them, of these mini workshops so you understand the model a little better. Let's see if I can find them. Yeah, so here they are. So I do this as well. Yeah, so you can see, I think you can see on the screen here, this is a small workshop. Can you see it okay?
Yep.
So this is, I just bought one for one of my industrial properties, because what I have found in this particular model is that what tenants want, and they're mostly industrial tenants, and there's some of them are just people with side hustles. I got one guy who rented one of these from me. He makes handmade guitars, right? I've got another where a lady makes handmade soaps. I've got another one rented to a young woman who makes high-end fashion and designs and clothing. So there's a lot of demand. These are very small. That is only 10 feet by 16 feet. But Ario, I'm going to put you to work. You got your calculator there?
Yes.
Okay. So this little shed costs, I bought it from a local supplier, cost $14,000, including HST. All right, so write that down, 14 grand. And then
So HST included?
Including
not
HST, yeah.
Okay.
So it costs $14,000. And then the gravel base, because you have to put a gravel base in, you plop these on a gravel base, costs another $3,500. So add that on. Then what we did was we brought electricity to it, and we put in a reverse cycle heat pump. So it's got heating and air conditioning. So the electrician was about $3 grand, and the reverse cycle heat pump was about $2,000, and then we use spray foam insulation, which is about $3,000. All right, so it's very basic. It just has electricity, lighting, heating, and air conditioning. That's it. And so what does that come up to, the total?
57,000.
Yeah, is it? It can't be that much.
So
read the numbers again. I'll add it up. Read the numbers to me.
So 14,000 for the from the supplier,
Right.
35,000 for gravel.
No,
base?
3,500.
Oh, 3,500. Okay.
Yeah. Keep going.
3,000 for the electrician.
Yep.
2,000 for the reverse heat pump, I believe.
Yep.
And 2,000 for the something else, I forget.
Okay, so it comes out to about $26,000. That is correct.
Yeah.
All right. So just put that in your memory, 26,000. I
Yeah.
rent these. I don't get, they don't pay much rent on them. They pay $750 per month for these here in Ontario, $750 a month plus HST, and they pay a contribution towards power. All right. So let's just go with 750. So multiply 750 by 12. What do you get?
9,000.
Yeah. And then I want you to multiply 9,000 by 0.66, and I'll tell you why in a second.
Just under 6,000.
Yeah, so let's say it's 6,000. The reason that we subtracted 34% is 34% is a number you'll see over and over and again. That's where your OPEX is. So that's for insurance, property taxes, repairs and maintenance, property management, vacancy allowance, 34%. Nothing to do with the cost of a mortgage, Ariel. Nothing to do with this. Just all that other stuff that you have to pay for. So you have net operating income on something like this, at least I do, of about $6,000, okay? And if you divide 6,000 by 26,000, you'll get your cap rate or capitalization rate. What do you get?
6 divided by 24?
6,000 divided by 26,000.
Oh, 26, okay. Roughly 23%?
Yeah, and that's about right. Our cap rates on these kinds of things are between 18 and 22%. Armin, what is a typical cap rate if the three of us bought a townhouse in Toronto and rented it out? You're muted.
It's 2.5%, I think.
Yeah, probably
2.5 to 3%.
So Ario, here's a skill testing question for you. What is better, 22% or 3.5%?
I think I like the 3.5 more.
Oh, you're killing me.
No, I'm joking.
I know that. All right. So you understand where we're going with this model.
Yes.
It's a very powerful model. I love it. I'm not sure you like it, but I love it. And you know, I teach this stuff to people in the States and Canada, a few overseas. But I liked it so much, I started doing it myself, right? Because I mean, the first guy I helped do, and I'll show you a slide deck on him, the first guy I helped do this model was in Phoenix, in Arizona. And his name is Kyle Powell, and nice guy, you know, in his 60s. And he was the very first one. He's actually in Gilbert, Arizona, so a suburb of Phoenix. And it was an incredible success. Like right away, his contractor yards filled up. And within about 3 years, he was netting $40,000 a month after paying everything, including his mortgage. So he's making about 40 grand a month for himself and working around 4 hours a day. And I thought, that's great. Well, what's wrong with me? So I bought a site and I started doing it too, which is not quite as successful as what Kyle has done in Arizona, but it's been quite successful and we like doing it. And so that was the very first one. And there's, you know, since then I probably have at least 20 coaching clients in different parts of the States and Canada. I've got one guy doing it in Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, a couple places in BC. So it's a good model. All right, let's go back to the spreadsheet then. All right, hang on a sec. So initially, what Chris is going to do is he's going to create some of these small contractor yards, probably just 50 feet by 50 feet, so 2,500 square feet. And he'll put two of these small workshops in two contractor yards and see how it goes. So you don't have to, you know, if you have 30 yards, you don't go out and buy 30 of those workshops. You go out and buy a couple, 2 or 3, and you see how it goes. All right. So, so for the 2 workshops, probably in Texas, he'll get less than I get in Ottawa. He'll probably get around 500 a month. I get 700, but or 750, but that Canada's more expensive. Then for the workshops that are already there, you know, the building that I showed you, probably get around $16 per square foot, triple net, which I'll explain in a minute. Then for his yards, he'll get about $400 for each yard. So within 2 or 3 years, he'll probably have income of about $220,000 on the site. And you have to deduct OPEX, like I was talking about before, your operating expenses, your property taxes, etc. And he might have net operating income of about $200,000 to $210,000, which is really fantastic. For a building that cost him $675,000, that is a very, very good number. And his cap rate, we think, will be around 20%. All right. Now, I'm going to ask Armin, if you were appraising this, what do you think the thing would be worth? What would be the market cap rate?
208, let's say, and I'll put a conservative 6.5 cap on it, 3.2 mil.
So let's just see what we get. So, Ario, do you understand what your brother just said?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we apply a market cap rate of 6.5% to that net operating income, it means that we could ask an appraiser to appraise it, and we might get this number, just over $3 million. So, you know, if you can invest $1 million and hopefully in 3 years you can maybe triple that in value, and you can generate this kind of return, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. And all right, so that's kind of, and that's what Chris is doing, and he has the resources. You know, once he's done his first one successfully, in Texas, there probably are 100 of these that he could do himself. You know, once he's done one, and you get that kind of a lift in 2 or 3 years, you know, that makes quite the difference. All right, so let me show you a couple other things. Now, how do you find these properties? Let me show you another one. Yeah, maybe I should show you this one first. So this one is Ariel, where are you based out of? Where are you living?
I'm in Ottawa.
You're in Ottawa, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. So this one is on Aikens Road. Do you know where that is?
No. But I see
Armin, do you know where
Canada
that is?
there.
Armin?
Yeah, this was the we talked about this. This was the Varun's property, or I guess
Exactly.
he was a tenant.
So your brother knows Aikens Road pretty well. That's what I recall anyway. And so this is one that clients of mine bought for 200, I can't remember if it was $250,000 or $275,000. It's in the middle of nowhere area. And it's got an 18,000 square foot warehouse here. It's got a coverall building, in fact, 2 coverall buildings, and you can't see it, but there's a farmhouse there. On the next slide, you can see it a little bit better. So what my client did was he cut this building up into small workshops, and you can see on these screens, I think this is one of your pals. That's Varun there. And he's in the building, and there are a bunch of other people in the building. So what he did with this particular model was, you know, my 3 clients who bought this together as partners, with all the small workshops, they rented up every single thing, every square foot on this 2-acre property within about 10 months. So, and it went from about $275,000 in value to over $3 million, and it didn't take that long, again, 2 or 3 years. Armin, the one thing that I didn't tell you is they wanted to expand this, not only to have more workshop space, but to add contractor yards, because many of the people who wanted to come here and rent also had lots of equipment, and they needed a place to, you know, a yard to put the equipment. So we went to the farmer next door, and we offered her a ridiculous amount of money to sever off and buy you know, probably 4 acres of farmland that we could add to this property. And she basically told me to go to hell.
Oh, wow.
She's an older lady. She doesn't need the money. And she said, don't call me again. She was pretty firm, but it's unfortunate. They are kind of landlocked, and this lady owns all the land around them.
Wow.
Now she's an old lady, and I said to the guys who bought this building, who are fairly young, just wait.
Yeah.
Because when the grandchildren get a hold of it, they won't care. They'll just sell it.
She'll come around to
Well, maybe she won't come around, but I'll bet you her grandchildren will get a
her
hold of it.
grandchildren. Yeah.
You know, typical children and grandchildren, you know what they want?
One.
All right. So there you go. All right. So I'll show you a couple of others that, you know, that you might be interested in. Here's another one I don't know if I showed you this one too, Armin. You tell me if you have seen it before.
No.
I don't think I showed you this one. So this is a building in a small town. It's in Belleville, Ontario, which is about 56,000 people, and it's got a very good local economy. It's quite strong. But this is a 3-story building here, boys, that we bought from a power sale. And
Okay.
it obviously has commercial at grade, and it had the ability to have apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor. So this is what you would call a mixed-use building. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So one of the things that we're doing with our commercial leasing, Armin, is we're looking for, you know, tenants who meet these criteria. They have to be able to resist competition from the internet. So I wouldn't want to be in a business where I'm in competition with Amazon or Wayfair. Yeah. I think that would be really difficult. So they have to, you know, so let's say you have a commercial tenant who's doing physiotherapy in your building. Until the internet can do physiotherapy, I'm not worried about the internet. Yeah. But if you had somebody who's delivering groceries, yeah, you got lots of competition. So it has to be internet resistant. The second one I've crossed out because it looks like we're past the pandemic. So it doesn't necessarily have to be resistant to a future pandemic. It also has to, beg pardon? It also has to be resistant to competition from a big box store. So again, I wouldn't put a hardware store in that building because there's a Home Depot not far away, and you just can't compete with Home Depot. It has to be recession resistant, and for example, a pub is recession. I don't want to call it recession proof, but it's recession resistant. And again, physiotherapy or dentistry, those sorts of things tend to be recession resistant. And the last one is I'm also looking for people who can, you know, take advantage of AI and the growth of AI. So I want to see from my tenants, Armin, I want to see a business model, and I want to understand if it makes sense and it meets at least some of these criteria, if not all of them. Okay. So I'll show you what we did with it. So it took us 3 years to renovate this thing. Wow. And it has beautiful apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor. It has a woman who runs a bridal boutique and a prom gown business on the ground floor here. And then here's Loyalist College, which runs a co-working space on the right-hand side. And you can see that the facade has been completely redone. Kind of more pictures of what it looks like today. And here are some of the apartments inside. And so it's a mixed-use building, and these apartments rent for what I consider ridiculously high prices. I mean, it is what it is. But this is an historic building. It's 150 years old. On the ground floor, it has 14 or 15 foot ceiling height. On the 2nd and 3rd floor, it's something like 11 feet. So it feels more like a loft. On the ground floor, this is some pictures of the co-working space. And then there's more pictures here of our build out for our tenant. This is for the woman who sells wedding gowns and prom gowns. And it's come out really well. You will see on some more pictures here. That's not very good. You'll see some pictures here of what it looks like today. Here we're dressing up the streetscape too. So this particular building, I'll just give you the spin on it. We bought it for $280,500, and it was a power sale. It had been disconnected from services. It had structural issues. You know, it was really in terrible shape, but it had incredible potential. We just got it reappraised. And of course, I don't have to tell you this, Armin, but in this particular environment that we're experiencing, it's not easy to get, you know, buoyant appraisals. But this appraisal came back very, very strong. It was appraised at $6.8 million.
Wow.
So in 3 years, we drove it. That is mostly my wife and her team. You know, my job is to, you know, write the checks, and her job is, you know, everything else.
The catch and the taxi.
Yeah, you know, that's a perfect division of labor. But you know, that's a pretty good result. You know, now
Yeah.
we put in a couple of $1 million. There's, you know, $2.5 million of our own money, but you know, it's gone from $280,500 to $6.8 million. Armin, guess how many days on market that was before we bought it?
I mean, so there were no connections. So that's an indication that it could have been.
No connections, nothing.
So that's 3 months right there plus. So I would say probably, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, that's a really good guess. I'll share. I got to share this with you because you're not going to believe it. But I'll share my screen again so you can see it and you can appreciate how difficult a condition it was. So this is what it looked like when I went down to do the building inspection 3 years ago. It was October of 2020, so just over 3 years ago. It had this horrible metal cladding. It had this disgusting brick veneer. Look at the back of the look at the back of the building here. You know, it was a Chinese restaurant, and the owner had gone through a bearing wall and hadn't put a lintel in, so the structure in the back was starting to, you know, actually fail. And when the windows on the second floor here at the back started popping out, instead of fixing the structural issues, what they did was they just boarded up the second floor and vacated it. So it's my opinion, Armin, that we should have a jail for bad building owners, and these guys are my first candidates to go to jail. But this is what it looked like. This is what it looked like inside. You know, it was just.
Is this the restaurant?
Incredible mess. What's that?
Is this the restaurant?
This
was this the restaurant?
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And you know, but these are the historic pictures. This is the building here on the right-hand side. This is probably from the 1940s. You know, downtown Belleville was a really thriving, happening place, and this was an absolutely beautiful building. So we were sure, we felt very confident that once we had, you know, taken the facade, the metal cladding off, we had redone the facade, it would be really quite special. And I didn't expect a $6.8 million valuation. Well, maybe I did, but that appraisal has really helped. Now, we did some other things, you know, because one of the questions you asked later on are what are some of the tips and tricks of commercial leasing? And I'll give you an example. In that particular building, the commercial space fronting on the main drag there is commercial space. But we got permission from the Committee of Adjustment. Do you know what a Committee of Adjustment is?
Yeah.
Ario, do you know what it is?
No, I don't know.
So a Committee of Adjustment is sometimes called a land division committee, where you can go and you can get a severance, you get a lot line adjustment, you can get a minor variance there.
Oh, okay,
It's a fairly simple process compared to like a full-on official plan amendment or a rezoning. It's relatively inexpensive, it's relatively quick, and it's about the only thing in municipal planning that's quick and cheap. It's about the only thing. So we went to the Committee of Adjustment in the city of Belleville, and we asked and got permission to put 2 ground floor apartments in the back. Okay, so that means that we you know, we were allowed residential above, but not at grade. And I wanted to have what's called a live work condition. That's super, super hot. All right. So I was looking, my wife did the research, she found this building. If it's worked out well, she gets all the credit. And if it doesn't work out well, I get all the heat. All right. That's the way it works in my family. And so so what we did was we have 2 apartments in behind there, which you can't see from, obviously, from the facade at the front, so that people can live and work in the same place. One of the apartments we call the entrepreneur and residence apartment, because Loyalist College, which has the co-working space there, right? Loyalist College, you know, can have teachers, mentors, whatever, lecturers, keynote speakers come to Belleville to teach the people, the young students there who are launching businesses or whatever they do, and they can actually stay in the building, and it's a few steps from their apartment to the co-working space.
Mhm.
Some of the other things that we did to push the income up is we are very big on medium-term rentals. Armin, you know what short-term rentals are, right? It's mainly Airbnb, right?
Yeah.
We do a lot, though, with medium-term rentals, which are typically 30 days, you know, 1 month to 6-month leases. And we don't call them leases, we call them guest agreements. Armin, do you know why we do that?
I guess the zoning, not the the bylaws, most likely, so that
That's
it's
a
not
good
long
guess.
term.
But it's really not that. It's to stay away from the Residential Tenancy Act.
Right, the RTA, yeah.
Okay, so in Ontario and British Columbia, I think might even be worse. But in New York State, for example, there are lots of places that have, you know, the equivalent of the Residential Tenancy Act. Over the last 3 years, inflation in Canada has been about 19%. In that 3-year period, which includes part of the pandemic years, landlords in Ontario have been allowed to raise their rents 1% and 2%. So
Yeah.
if your costs go up, Ario, by 19%, and you can only raise your rents by 3%, guess what's happening to your profitability?
Going down.
It's really getting, it's getting, you know, it's brutal. So what we do is, Armin, if you don't mind writing it down, I have a guest agreement. If you ever decide to do, you know, the kinds of things that push your numbers up, and you're looking for a guest agreement, reach back to me. Nowhere in that guest agreement does it say the word rent or the word lease. Right? It's purely a guest agreement. And anyway, so what that means is that if inflation continues to rip along at, you know, 5 or 6% or 8% or whatever it might be, even at 4 or 5, we do not want to get caught in our buildings only able to raise the rent 1 or 2%. So I'll give you the numbers for a micro suite, you know, one of those studio apartments. If we rented it out long term, we get $1,600 a month, and the tenant also pays electricity and water. So we get $1,600 for a 300 or 400 square foot studio. If we put it on medium-term rental, we do furnish them, we get about $2,500 a month. So it goes up from $1,600 to $2,500. If we put them on short-term rentals, we get probably about $3,000 a month. So, you know, significantly more, but it's a hell of a lot of work, right? Short-term rentals, you know, people come for 3 or 4 days, a week, sometimes 2 days, then you've got to clean it and get ready for the next person. So we do an awful lot with medium-term rentals, and we find the demand for medium-term rentals is actually quite substantial. Even in a small town like Belleville, you know, we'll have a teacher going to the college there, and he's teaching or she's teaching for 4 months. She needs a place for 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
Or contractors coming to town to do a project. We've got a couple of contractors who are working on an Amazon fulfillment center in that area, and they're going to be there for 6 months. And we just do guest agreements, and they pay $2,500 a month instead of $1,600. But it's furnished, and it has internet and stuff like that. So there's some additional costs, but still, it pushes your numbers up. So you can push your cap rate up from, you know, like we were saying in a Toronto townhouse, from 2.5 or 3%, maybe 3.5 if you're lucky. You can push your cap rate up, as we did on this building, to about 8%. Any questions? I don't want to talk for 2 hours, not hear anything from you guys.
No questions. It's just that we were hoping to pivot more to CRE. So we're looking at corporate tenants and developing corporate.
Yes,
You know,
I recognize that, but I wanted to make sure you understand, because you probably will, you're young guys. You'll probably end up on a mixed-use building. I want to make sure you know how to push the cap rates up. One of the ways you do that on the commercial side, Armin, is that you try and write triple net leases if you can. And a triple net lease, so Ario knows, it means the tenant pays, the base rent or the minimum rent, plus their share of the operating costs, plus their share of the property taxes, plus their own utilities. And they might pay for your bookkeeping and accounting, and a triple net lease is very powerful. And if you can add a percentage rent, that really, really helps the landlord.
Okay.
And you know how to do a percentage rent, right, Armin?
No, I don't.
All right.
I don't know about Ario, but
all right.
Percentage rent.
I'll talk about that, but you do know triple net leasing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so a percentage rent is very, very important. And I'll give you an example. I did a lease for Chris Phillips. He's a former hockey player with the Ottawa Senators, and he opened up a pub called the Big Rig on Queensview Drive. Do you know it?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I think I've been there as well.
And his nickname when he played for the Senators was the Big Rig. So the pub had to be called the Big Rig. So it was quite an expensive fit up, because it wasn't just a restaurant and a pub, it was also a brew pub. So they actually brew their own beer there on site. The cost of the fit up was $6 million for a restaurant. We got the landlord, and you got to remember, I was only representing the tenant here, not the landlord.
Yeah.
We got the landlord to contribute $750,000 to the fit up. That's called a fit up allowance.
Okay, fit up allowance, yeah.
Fit up allowance. So the landlord and the fit up allowance only comes to the tenant after the fit up is complete, after an occupancy permit is granted by the city, and after the business opens, plus 46 days. Why 46 days? It's to make sure there are no liens on the building. So the landlord had to write a check to Chris, to his company, for $750,000 plus HST, but only after those hurdles were crossed. Okay. And the landlord insisted. They asked for a 6% percentage rent, which means that whatever the volume Chris would achieve, 6% of that annual sales would go to the landlord. I fought that like heck because I thought Chris would do very well. So we got the landlord down to 3.75% from 6%.
Okay.
I asked Chris what he expected his sales would be, and he said he thought they would come in at about $3.5 million a year, which for an Ottawa restaurant is pretty good. So if you take $3.5 million and you multiply that by 0.035, that's another $122,500 in rent that's payable to the landlord. That's like 10 grand a month. Do you understand? So the percentage rent for the landlord is fantastic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, or fortunately for Chris, his first year sales were $6 million. So the landlord was laughing all the way to the bank. It was incredible. And I felt bad for Chris, but he said, don't feel bad for me. Most Ottawa restaurants are, if they can get to 3.5 million in sales, it's a joy. We're over 6 million, and that puts him in a very, very, very small group, right? Now, the sales are less today because that was a first year thing. And then it leveled out at about 5.5 million. But that percentage rent has been great for the landlord. So if you guys are doing leases, you want to see if you can get that accepted by your tenant. And the way
percentage rent.
Percentage rent. And the way it works is that Chris has to report his sales for the month at the end of each month within 15 days. And he has to enclose a check for the percentage rent. It's like a royalty. has to enclose a check, or in this case, it would be electronic funds transfer for the percentage rent. And the landlord has the right to audit Chris's books twice a year, right? Just to make sure he's not cheating. But Armin, I can tell you that no tenants that I've ever represented would take the risk of not reporting sales accurately to their landlord, because one, it's a breach of your lease, in which case you can get locked out and lose your $6 million fit up. And you can go to jail for that. It's called fraud.
Fraud. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I did talk to Mr. Phillips, to Chris, and I said, you know, you can't keep two sets of books. Al Capone was a famous gangster in Chicago, and I don't know how many people he killed. He killed lots of people, but he didn't go to jail for killing people.
Fraud.
He went to jail because they caught him with two sets of books. So it's a really bad idea, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it never happens, but everybody asks me, well, how do you prevent fraud? And I said, well, it could happen, and I'll give you an example of one of my buildings. In one of my buildings, a mechanic came to me and wanted to rent one of my workshops and a little yard out at the front of the property. And I said, what are you going to do with the yard? He said, well, I'll put some cars in the yard for sale. Oh, I said, that's kind of interesting. I like that idea, because he has an OMVIC license, if you know what that is.
Yeah.
OMVIC is, it allows you to sell used cars, right? You have to be licensed for new cars and used cars. So he had his OMVIC license. I said, that's awesome. I put in a percentage rent of 4% for yours truly. Because he said he was going to sell 4 or 5 cars at, you know, maybe $6,000 or $7,000. So let's say he sells 5 cars for $6,000. It's $30,000 in sales a month. 4% would be an extra $1,200 for me. But when the pandemic hit, his sales, he was selling like 15 or 20 cars a month. Right, because nobody wanted to get on a bus or you know, the light rail. The light rail doesn't work anyway, but nobody wanted to get on a bus. So all of a sudden, my percentage rent, like on 20 cars at 6,000, 120 grand, my 4% was closer to $5,000 a month for this little workshop. That was unbelievable. That's my #1 workshop.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really great. So percentage rent could be in all kinds of different areas. Could be even in industrial. Could be obviously in retail. I mean, there's any number of. Now, your tenants will resist that, but you guys are going to learn to negotiate and be experts at that. So hopefully, you'll be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, but this doesn't. I don't think it would fly with the corporate tenants, would it? Like the
well,
Tim Hortons and Starbucks.
Apple was a tenant of mine in when I owned a downtown Ottawa building. We owned a tower down there, and I don't think Apple would report their monthly sales to me.
Yeah,
it would be nice to get, you know, a 0.0001% of Apple's sales, but there's no chance.
Yeah.
So it depends on your client. If it's a small dispensary, a physiotherapy clinic, you know, yes. If it's a medical office, not a chance.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way. I mean, no doctor is going to report his or her income to you or me and pay a percentage rent. But dispensaries, restaurants, physiotherapy clinics, you know, all you know, registered massage therapists, all kinds of people, you can do that. I have a chiropractor who pays percentage rent. Like I said, I got a used car guy who pays a percentage rent.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. All right. Let's see what else we can do. I wanted to show you, I don't know if this would be of interest to you. It might not be, but I wanted to show you what one of my clients just purchased in Pembroke, Ontario. So just north of Ottawa, about an hour, a little bit more. So they bought, this is a site that's, if you can see my cursor moving around, it's about 185 acres. And it's in Pembroke, and it's zoned for development. So you don't have to do an official plan amendment or a rezoning. It's, well, there might be some rezonings, but it is ready to be developed. All right. And for
Okay.
you guys, if you were going to do anything like this, you want to see if you could avoid an official plan amendment and a rezoning. So this is, I don't know if you're interested in doing subdivisions that at some point in the future, is that something you would consider doing?
I guess not really. We've dealt with a few projects with like this, but trying not to deal with city and all these kinds of people. But I'd be if the returns are there, we'd be open to it, of course.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just give you a rundown of this project. I won't spend much time on it, but we'll look
No
at it.
worries. Yeah, let's do it.
We're recording it, and it's your property, so you can refer back to it if you ever do something like this. So the first thing that you have to do if you're going to do some land development, unless you're a huge company, most of us, we have to de-risk the process. And how do you de-risk it? So this property here, I think cost, I think they bought it for $3.5 million. I could have the numbers wrong, but it's about that, $3.5 million. How did they negotiate that? They got $1 million vendor take back or seller take back mortgage. So part of the financing, Ario, comes from the seller rather than from the bank. So what we did here was, it's a $3.5 million purchase. We arranged for a 50% loan to value mortgage on the property with a lender, so about 1.75 million. Then another $1 million, which was a second mortgage, which was loaned to the project by the seller. And then they needed about $750,000 plus closing costs to actually purchase this. The people who bought it, the young people who bought this, brought in, I think, 2 or 3 investors, and the investors put up almost all of the money. All right. I think the 2 prime movers, husband and wife team that bought this, probably put in about $250,000 of their own money, and the rest of it came from other people. But they ended up owning more than 50% of the project. How does that work? You guys have any idea how you might, and it doesn't matter what project, could be a shopping plaza that you're buying. How is it possible for entrepreneurs to put up a relatively small amount of money and end up owning 50 or 60 or 70% of a project rather than maybe 10 or 15%?
They put it on they raise the money, and then they use, I guess they could use Olympia Trust to register it on title.
So there is
promissory notes, I guess.
There's a neat thing here that I'd like you to understand, because it'll help you as you develop. You've heard the expression cash is king, right?
Yeah.
Right. The way they put it, the golden rule was supposed to be do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But entrepreneurs have changed that. The golden rule is now he or she who has the gold rules. Right? You probably heard that. I think the original golden rule was better, but anyway. So there's a thing called, I call it Mad River financing. Right.
Okay.
And the reason I call it that, you can't even look it up, I just made up the term, is the first deal I did like this was in a ski hill in the United States called Mad River. And there was a young entrepreneur, this is a long time ago, a young entrepreneur was buying this ski hill, I think for about $2.5 million, and he had $100,000.
Okay.
And he had 2 partners who were rich dudes who like skiing, I guess. And they each put in, I think, $600,000. So he had $100,000, and then the other guys had $600,000 and $600,000. So they had equity of about $1.3 million. So his initial, and he's a former student of mine, and his initial idea was, well, I put up $100,000, they put up 1.2 million, so that he would end up owning 100,000 divided by 1,300. He would end up owning, that didn't work. Yeah, he would end up owning like 8% of this business. I said, that is a terrible deal. You're doing all the work, you're putting the deal together, you're going to be on site as the general manager, running 78 hours a week, and these rich dudes are going to own 92%, and you're going to own 8%. And that's terrible. He said, well, yeah, but they got the money. I said, yeah, but they need you. They can't do it themselves. These are older fellows. They're not going to be worrying about the toe breaking down. They're not. They're going to be up in the chalet drinking. So what we did was they each put in $100,000 of equity. Okay, so they each put in $100,000 of equity, so that now he went from owning 7.7% to owning 1/3, and the other two guys each owned 1/3. Now you'd say, okay, well, that's great, except where does the other money come from? The other money, the other whatever it was, $1 million from these rich dudes came in as debt. You understand? So that you could buy, in theory, I suppose you could buy an NHL franchise for $950 million and only have $100,000 and end up with a significant ownership stake using a Mad River type of arrangement. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. So since then, though, if I were doing that again, what I would have done is he would have put in $100,000, and he would have got the other two fellows to put in maybe $40,000 each. So the total amount of equity would have been $180,000, and he would have ended up with 55 or 60% of the business. And they would have ended up with 20% each or something like that. And then the rest would come in as debt. Right. So I would have been more aggressive.
Yeah.
It's called Mad River financing.
Mad River financing. Yeah.
All right. So that you'll remember that, I'm sure, because it was a very successful project. So, all right, let's go back to this particular land development. And so how do you de-risk this? Well, part of the de-risking process that you do here is you bring in these investors with money, and you use the Mad River financing so that the two young people who are the prime movers here will end up with probably about 60% ownership, and the rich dudes will end up with about 40%. Now, you might think that it's a terrible deal for the rich dudes, but it's not. Because let's go back to to Mad River, the original transaction. Think about this. For the investors in that ski hill, once their debt is repaid to them, right? Remember, they each had $500,000 as a loan, and as the ski hill does better and they develop more sources of finance, they can refinance and pay their $500,000 each back to them. So now they own 1/3 of a really successful ski establishment, and their total investment is $100,000. Do you understand that, Armin?
Yeah.
So from the point of view of an investor, it's a very good deal. And you'll find that today investors really like having at least some of their investment as debt because it comes back to them.
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of de-risking this particular project, what we're going to do, and we're starting this month actually, is we're going to create at least 2, if not 3, commercial blocks via severance, which, as I said earlier in this call, is cheap and cheerful, and we'll sell that, right? So they might get, for a 1-acre site, they might get, I don't know, $350,000 or $400,000 for it in Pembroke. So somebody could build a nice little shopping plaza there. So if you think about it, they paid $3.5 million for 185 acres. That's about $19,000 an acre. So if you can sell a site for $400,000 an acre and you paid $19,000 an acre, you can see how you start to de-risk the process.
Yeah.
So and because severances are relatively inexpensive and relatively quick, within probably a month or 2 or 3, we will have at least 2 sites up for sale. Something else that we found when we walked on the property is, you can see here on the left-hand side, there's a sand pit here. It's an operating sand pit, and sand is a very, very valuable commodity. You know, it's used for cable laying, backfill, you name it, it's very valuable. It has about 1 million tons of capacity, and that's worth probably about $2.50 to $3 a ton. So they have about $2 or $2.5 million worth of sand. They could sever that sand pit off and probably sell that for $1.5 million, probably in the spring.
Wow.
So you buy the property for $3.5 million, and you do a couple of severances. They probably can recapture a lot of, if not all of the money that they have put out, so that they'll end up with, maybe out of the 185 acres, they may end up with 140 acres of development land for townhouses, singles, more commercial, whatever. They might end up with that for a close to zero cost. That's the goal here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now you're experts.
Experts, yeah, in sand and gravel.
I'll show you one other that worked really, really well. This was this was an acquisition, and this is a typical way you would acquire land for whatever purpose that you're thinking of, and you want to de-risk the process, because it's any land use today, given your interaction with municipalities and towns and counties and ministries, is so difficult that you want to de-risk it. So this is another client of mine. He bought 18 acres of industrial land in the west end of Ottawa. And I'm going to make up the numbers because I don't really remember it, but I think he paid $900,000 for 18 acres, right?
Okay.
And what he did was, again, he created 3 severances. This is a lot that's about 1.8 acres, another one 1.8, another 4 acres, and it has frontage on the road here, because his use was, all he needed was the back. He doesn't need frontage on the road. His use doesn't require that. He does mini storage, if you know the mini storage business, and he wanted to develop mini storage. Mini storage doesn't need frontage. It's not like you're selling Coke and or a Coca-Cola or chips or whatever that, you know, you need frontage. So yeah, frontage tends to go for a whole lot more. So I think he paid $900,000 for this. And each one of these smaller sites, this one I think sold for $300,000, another $300,000, and this one was probably about $500,000. So he actually ended up with his 9 acres at the back for a negative amount of money, if you understand the point I'm making.
Yeah.
So that's a way you might de-risk a land acquisition. It's not that complicated to understand. It takes a little bit of work to do it, but it's a really good result. And in most cases, you can do stuff like this.
De-risking land.
All right, I've dealt with that. All right, I dealt with that one. One of the questions you asked me was, how do you work on you know, lease renewals? And I'll just show you one that I did probably maybe 2 months ago. This is an email actually I sent to a vice president at Loyalist College. Remember I told you Loyalist is a commercial tenant of mine on the ground floor of that building in Belleville?
Yeah. And
I'll just read it to you. Jeremy, thanks again for doing this while you're still in recovery. He had an accident at home. As you know, it's been a struggle with the Burroughs building, that's the building's name, to get it through the rebuild process. The building is late in terms of delivery, occupancy, and it's over budget. So what am I doing? I'm telling him I'm poor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a tenant. Yeah. I'm throwing myself you know, at his mercy. I certainly didn't tell him that we got a $6.8 million appraised value. Right? Yeah. I just, and by the way, it did take, it was supposed to take 2 years, but because we were building through the pandemic, it actually ended up taking us 3 years. It just took longer. And it was over budget. So I don't tell people things that are untrue. Right? That you don't want to lie to people, but because that'll come back to haunt you. But you know, you want to tell what a lawyer friend of mine told me is the smart truth.
Smart truth, yeah.
Smart truth. All right. So try not to lie. The only time I might lie is to my wife if she says, "Do I look fat in these jeans?" The answer is always no. Absolutely not. You look great. So maybe a couple of, you know, the occasional untruth, but try not to say anything that's untrue. Anyway, so that was what I told him. Having said that, it's hard to bring a 150-year-old structure into the 21st century and up to current building code standards. Loyalist has been a huge help, and both Dawn and I and our team, that's my wife Dawn, and I are grateful. In terms of a lease renewal, we could do another 2 years starting October 1, 2023, or 3 years if you prefer. We were hoping that Loyalists might take on electricity and water utilities because they pay some of the utilities, but not all. And I wanted to change that. And I asked Dawn what those costs were. They're not very much. Water averages $105 a month, and power runs between $75 and $212, depending on how busy they are. Plus, I was hoping you could increase the base rent from the existing $5,000 plus HST. Inflation is killing us. The CPI has increased 19% in the last 3 years. And I'm not asking for a 19% increase, but maybe Loyalists could afford about half of that, say 10%. Kindest personal regards, Bruce. So I'll stop sharing again so you can listen carefully. What I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to establish what's called anchor pricing. Okay.
Anchor pricing. Okay.
Anchor pricing. So let's say you come in to, I don't know, a furniture store, and I'm a furniture salesman. And you said, I'm looking for a Murphy bed for one of my my bunkies at my campsite. And I show you this incredible Murphy bed that's got hydraulic lift in it, and it has all kinds of other features in it, and it's $10,000. You go, whoa, $10,000 for a bed? That's way more than I was expecting. Oh yeah, but I've got one over here. It's not quite as good, and it's $2,000. Oh, well, that I can afford. The $10,000 is the anchor price. All right. So in that little blurb that I sent the vice president, 19% was the anchor, right?
Yeah.
And you know, oh my God, I have to pay a 19% increase in my rent after 2 years. That's a lot. And what we actually got was 10%. All right. So, you know, negotiating is quite tricky, and you have to really think it through. And if we get a chance to do some more coaching together, you know, we'll talk more about how to do that. One of the crucial things, though, that I would want you guys to do, and I'll see if I can find it here. Yeah, I think I've got it here. Always prepare, and this is a very strong method of negotiating. Always prepare something that's called a BATNA. All right, you should be able to see it up here, I guess. A BATNA, B-A-T-N. It's called Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. And before I go into just about any negotiation, I do that in my head, right? What is my best alternative to a negotiated agreement? So with Loyalist College, if they said, no, we're not going to give you the 10 points you want, we're only going to give you, say, 2 or 3%, I would have told them no. I would have said to them, no, I'm not going to do that. My costs are up, like all Canadians, 19%, 2 or 3%. No, I'm not doing that. And if you don't want to continue on, as you know, in commercial leasing, once the lease is finished, if they don't have any options to renew, they're done. Right? There's no overholding provision. It's not like residential where people can hang on, right? If you have to get rid of them, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
So my best alternative to negotiated agreement here is I ran the largest co-working space in Eastern Ontario for many, many years, very successful. And I had done the numbers. I get, about $6,000 a month for that space, a little bit more than that now, I guess, but $6,000 a month for that space, which is a decent rent for Belleville. But there are 32 places in that co-working space that I can rent out, and I get $350 per space. So if Loyalist had told me no, I would say, okay, goodbye, and I'd run it myself. And if you work out the numbers, I'd probably go from $6,000 a month to about $11,000 a month in revenue if I ran it myself. Now, I wouldn't run it myself. I would have somebody run it. But the best alternative to negotiate agreement with Loyalist would be exactly that. You guys follow that?
Yeah.
Now, I don't threaten anybody, but if we hadn't gotten the 10 points that I wanted, I would have said to Jeremy, well, I'm okay if you want to move on. I wouldn't tell him necessarily what I was going to do with it. I would just say,
yeah,
fine, you want to move on? That's fine. But, that's the way to strengthen your position and strengthen your negotiating tactics, if you will, by reassuring yourself that there's an alternative. There's another tenant out there. There's another alternative out there. And I use something which I call create your own clients often, right? So if somebody, one of the reasons why I like the small workshop, model a lot is if you have an 18,000 square foot warehouse like the guys on Aikens Road, and you have, say, 20 tenants in there. I don't know, they wouldn't have that many, but maybe they have 15 in there. If one of them leaves, it's not catastrophic. If you rent that all to one group and they leave, you've gone from 100% occupancy to zero. Right. Yeah. So that's something that also you want to be thinking about when you are doing these kinds of commercial projects. I had a building once which was about 180,000 square feet, an office building, and Nortel was in 120,000 of it, and then they went broke. So you can imagine we went from 100% occupancy to maybe 35 or 40%. So you can imagine what your financials look like. Right. So you have to really think it through. All right, I'm going to stop just for a minute and turn back to you guys and ask you to ask me some questions, because I got lots of other stuff I can go through, but I don't want to just talk for 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Ario has any questions, but for me, I want to look for sites that corporate tenants are interested in. So I want to figure out how to find the sites, but also with the corporate tenants, who do I reach out to? I guess it will be their development manager or a real estate manager that I would have to reach out to. But is there a way to find them at large in terms of okay, there's like so many people that so many, I mean, companies you can reach out to, but how do you find that person responsible within that organization?
It's the internet has made it much easier than it was when I was your age. And I'll show you an example of it. Let's say you had a property where you thought Canadian Tire might be interested in the property. Let's say you found one, then you said, "Wow, this would make a great site for Canadian Tire." Yeah. Canadian Tire used to have an organization called CTRO, Canadian Tire Real Estate Organization, but it's been replaced by CT REIT. Okay. So you have to do a little bit of research, and this is 5 minutes of research. It's not like I was talking about where my wife will do days and weeks, even sometimes months of research to find the right property to buy. Yeah. So when you go here on their site, CT REIT, which raises money to buy these properties and leases them to Canadian Tire. So Canadian Tire, the publicly traded company, does not own real estate. CT REIT does. Armin, do you know why that they don't put it in one company?
I guess so their numbers don't look bad on the stock.
So you know, Ario, where your brother's going on that. If Canadian Tire, the publicly traded company, had real estate on its balance sheet, the depreciation reserves would depress their earnings, which would depress their stock price. So large companies, do not, they like Amazon prefers to lease these incredible fulfillment centers, because if you took all those fulfillment centers all across North America, across the world, and you put them on Amazon's balance sheet, those depreciation reserves, which are non-cash, would depress their earnings. And I don't know what happened to their stock, but wouldn't surprise me if it went down 30%. And these the executives, the CEOs and the COOs and the CTOs, they're all on stock options. So if your stock falls by 30%, that really hurts their earnings. They don't like that. So what these large companies will do is they'll often either lease the way Amazon does, or in the case of Canadian Tire, they'll have a separate organization that buys and holds real estate. In this case, it's now CT Region. So if you look at this, you know right away that you would probably be talking to Jody Spiegel, Senior Vice President of Real Estate. You just look her up, you contact her on LinkedIn, and these people, they want to hear from you because that's their job, is to find sites for Canadian Tire centers across Canada.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not that difficult, and they want to hear from you. If you have a site that you think would be appropriate for shoppers, same kind of research. You're going to find the head of real estate. You're going to send her or him, listen, we've got a great site for a new shoppers. And what Jody would do here is she would assign a review of your site to somebody on her staff. She wouldn't do it herself, but you start at the top.
Yeah. Okay. But there are so many corporate companies, like, I don't know, there was one that I saw the other day. It was a shawarma place. They're growing quite rapidly, but how can we go and like let's say Mary Brown's, these guys are coming up a little bit. So how do I find them at large? Like how do I know, okay, like this is the site, most likely will be good for a drive-through. If it's good for a drive-through, how many people can I reach out to that would be interested? Besides the big names, who else would be interested in this kind of location and site,
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I coach another. Ario, how old are you?
I'm 23 now.
23. Wow, that's a great age. And Armin, I've asked you, but I've forgotten.
28.
28. So I coach another young guy and his dad. And the guy is like, he's still a teenager. I think he's like, I think he might not even be 19. I think he might be 18. Like the kid is like super smart. Way smarter than I was at 18. That's for sure. And he is relentless. He works really hard. Most teenagers like to sit around and drink beer and smoke weed, but not him. He is very determined to be successful, and his dad has quite a few resources, and they own a number of shopping plazas. And so, he did a number of things. I'll just remind myself exactly what it was that he did. Where are we? Not that one. Yeah, he spent an incredible amount of time. This was a plaza that they bought in Almont.
Okay.
Or was it Arnprior? I don't remember. It was either Arnprior or Almont. And it had a vacancy at the front, and he wanted to put he thought it was the right thing to do was be put in a Kentucky Fried Chicken or some other fast food restaurant. So he did, I told him to do exactly the same thing that we just talked about. You go on, he looked at Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken, a couple of other fast food operations, and eventually, and he just did exactly that. He just went to the vice president of real estate in Eastern Ontario or Ontario region, and he eventually did the deal. I helped him with the lease with a fast food chain, and the thing that he had to do in order to get them to sign up was he had to put in a drive-through, and that was a little bit tricky. but we did manage to get a drive-through and for the chain, and he's done a 20-year lease with these guys, including a percentage rent. So this is a young kid. He's not afraid of doing the work. One of the things I find sometimes in coaching class, they can be a little bit lazy. I'm not saying you guys are, but they can be. And if they can't find something, because you know what it's like, if you play video games, you've got an attention span of maybe 1.5 seconds, right? And so you can't be successful, with all due respect to the young people today, with an attention span that lasts about 1.5 seconds or less. You have to be patient and you have to do the research. So that would be one thing that you would do. The other thing that I asked him to do was put up signage, right? You know, do that. You know, put it on social media, put it on YouTube, put it on TikTok. TikTok is huge today, if you know what you're doing. So there's lots of ways to get the message out there. For the smaller operators, the guy who's going to do the shawarma shop, right? They're going to rely on the site signage, or they're going to look at Kijiji. You know, believe it or not, Kijiji, and in the United States, Craigslist does the same thing as Kijiji in Canada. So there's all kinds of ways to attract tenants. What I think you would do if you're going to build a plaza, for example, and I like the small plazas, I really like them. If you're going to build a small plaza, or you're going to buy one, this was an existing plaza that they bought. And the time to buy these plazas is when they're half vacant, right?
Yeah.
And so this young man and his father, I advised them on the purchase, and I said, this is a fantastic location in a town, I think it was Almont, that is growing fast. And right now, because of the pandemic, lots of these shops are closed, but the pandemic won't last forever. And the kid is 18. You know, I mean, hopefully it's not going to last too long, and it didn't, 2 or 3 years, I guess. So they bought the plaza for a very good price. And then what they did was they put the fast food restaurant in front, and then they had enough room at the back to add another unit. And so they did. And what we did because it was a long, narrow plaza, with the unit at the back, it was like an L shape, if you know what I mean. So it would sort of stick out. It was a little bit higher. You know, we pushed the roof line up and we pulled it out so that you could see it as you drive by. So it would have a better profile. And for that, I thought the ideal use, and they thought as well, would be a dispensary or small pharmacy. And what they did was they contacted some of the bigger guys. They weren't interested. It was too small. But what they did was, again, this young fellow was relentless. He drove around the area and he found a number of these small dispensaries, which could be as small as 1,000 square feet or 1,500 square feet. And he convinced one of them. He just would go into the store, introduce himself to the owner, which is usually a pharmacist, and say, look, here's our plans. We got this beautiful brand new space with great signage. Are you interested? And that's how he actually found a dispensary tenant for his plaza, just shoe leather.
Interesting. Okay. Got it. Okay. And then, so how do we go about, I guess, finding sites, and then how can we do a cost of development analysis, like quantity surveying, to see if the numbers make sense, and also, I guess, the planning as well, which would potentially cost some money, like site plan and all that. I guess that's for building, but like,
what I would recommend to you two guys, because you're young, and you know, I don't want you to get into something that is going to bog you down in 3 years of planning.
Yeah.
I'm the development manager for a client of mine. He is a veterinarian, and he wants to build a new small 5,400 square foot clinic in Canada. He has a very successful practice, but he is renting. And he wants to, you know, stop renting and own his own spot. So he bought a 2-acre site. It's zoned both commercial and residential. So he built a house on it, part of the property, and he's going to build a 5,400 square foot commercial building on the same property. The 2 acres, it has frontage on actually 3 roads. The commercial, the new clinic will have access to a major road, and the house, which is actually built and occupied, has a residential street. So it's perfect for what he wanted.
Okay.
He has to do a site plan. He has spent $240,000 on studies and fees, and as of last month, we're now at the end of our 3rd year of applying for site plan approval. 3rd year.
Wow.
So he spent close to $250,000 and 3 years. And
Wow.
I've got a lot of knowledge in this field. I've helped him, I think, considerably, put a good team together. The city of Ottawa is very, very, very difficult to deal with. Very difficult. And I wouldn't want you guys to get bogged down in something like that.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the first, your proposal is to buy an existing one and create value in it, and maybe buy something vacant.
Buy something that nobody else wants. That's what I
create value. Yeah.
Create value. You know, animation area is something, it's a word you're going to hear me use a lot. Animation, it's not Disney animation. Animation is bringing new revenue streams to buildings. You know, I talked about percentage rents and how that helps. I talked about a live-work condition. I talked about medium-term rentals. You know, there's lots of things that you can do to raise revenues. And that's an area which I thought was under-researched. When I started doing this coaching thing 10 years ago, people were very focused on, you know, improving the cost side of the business. You know, how do you better insulate your building to reduce your heating costs? Well, that's very important, but I didn't think I could contribute much to that. But on the revenue side, that's where I've been focused for the last 10 years. We've been having a lot of success. So you want to find something, again, days on market, long DOM, you know, where people, you know, have basically given up. You know, it could be an industrial building like the one on Aikens Road. It had sat vacant for probably 2 or 3 years. And or the plaza, you know, which was decimated by COVID, but you know, my clients weren't bothered by that, and it takes courage to do that, right? You know, you're buying a half-empty building, you go, oh my God, are we crazy? But it would be a lot faster for you, and I think a lot easier. And when you've got more experience, you probably will build some of your own plazas or whatever you decide to do. But I wouldn't do that to start.
Okay, so you're saying we should, at least for now, maybe stay away from building, if anything?
I think so. You know, I don't mind additions, right? Additions like this plaza in Almont, we put a 1,500 square foot addition on the back. We put a drive-through. That's relatively straightforward. A site plan agreement in the city of Ottawa, almost $250,000 in studies and fees so far, and 3 years. That's too long. You can go broke doing that. No, my client has lots of money. He's not going to go broke. He's a very successful vet, but and he's determined. I mean, he's never going to give up. He's going to get this done. So am I. But you know, you just have to be careful. That's all.
Yeah.
I do have one more question.
Sure.
Speaking of land, what's your opinion on, let's say, contaminated land? Is it something like what's your experience? Would you say it's something like maybe worth looking into?
Well,
you know,
I guess something that's cheap.
It's interesting that you asked that question, because I did a land assembly for CTRO, Canadian Tire Real Estate Organization, the predecessor of CT REIT. And they wanted to build a new store on Bank Street, sort of south of Ottawa. And they asked me to help them put a land assembly together. So I think I needed 5 or 6 properties. Land assemblies are very difficult to do. So you're trying to get 5 or 6 sellers. It's like herding cats, right? It's hard. You know, you have to get 5 or 6 sellers to agree so you can put together a big site. And two of the sites, no, maybe only one of the sites, I think, had significant contamination, really significant. And so it was Bank Street and like Walkley or something like that. And so I went to Canadian Tire and said, look, I know this site has contamination, because there was a railroad siding there. A railroad siding had been there for probably 100, 150 years. And railroad sidings are the worst. They pull these trains off and then they dump whatever, you know, they were shipping armaments in World War I and World War II. They were shipping all kinds of crap, and they'd shovel out whatever the crap was, and that would go on this site. And it did not bother Canadian Tire, because we were able to go to the Ministry of Environment and get a certificate from them that said we could develop the site as long as we didn't disturb any of the land next to the siding. We didn't disturb it, we didn't dig it up, and that there would never be any residential development there. So for what you guys want to do, if you're going to put residential there, the standards are way higher, because that pollution that on the side of the site that Canadian Tire bought, if it gets into your house, it's got like VOCs in it, volatile organic compounds, and all kinds of other stuff. It off gases for the next 100 years. And if it gets into your house and you have a family there and kids, it's devastating for your health. Do you understand? But if it's a store, and the store is over here and the off gassing is over here, and you don't build anything on it and you don't disturb it, then that's okay. So we went to the Ministry of Environment, we got them to sign off on it, and then Canadian Tire closed on the site. Canadian Tire Real Estate Organization closed on the site, and they built a beautiful building there. So you can manage it, but if you wanted to do any kind of residential development, I would stay away from it.
Okay.
So I'm guessing stay away from it because the costs are significant.
Well, if you have to do remediation, it's quite significant. But yeah. I can tell you that one of my clients bought a mini storage business south of Ottawa. And in fact, I was there, I think, yesterday. I'll show you. I took some pictures. I think I got them here. Give me 1 second. It was pretty cold yesterday.
Getting there.
Oh, it was freezing on the site. Where it might not be.
Winter is coming, yeah.
Oh yeah, winter's coming. You guys like the cold weather?
I'm a fan.
Ario likes it, and I run away from it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. My wife is a Scottish girl, and she loves the cold weather. I don't. We're actually going to Australia for Christmas.
Oh, nice.
Well, I got family there. My oldest son and his family is there, so we're going to go visit them. And let's see. Oh, here we are. Yeah. So, yeah. So Australia at this time of the year is getting a lot hotter, right? Because it's the other side of the world.
Summer,
right?
yeah.
So when we get there, we'll be there for December and January, a couple of months. It'll be like, we're going to Brisbane. It'll be, I don't know, in Fahrenheit, it'd be 85 to 95 degrees every day.
Yeah.
I'll like that, Armin. So let me show you this site, since you asked about brownfields. So this is a company called, it's now called Just the Spot. It's another mini storage business. And they've got contractor yards and mini storage. This is an old school portable, so you can have your contractor yards, and you can have a little office there. You can see they got a porta potty there. It's pretty basic, and it's a very successful operation. They're clearing some more of the land right now. You can see these are pictures, like I said, I took yesterday. This is the main office here, and there's a 1-bedroom apartment there. So Armin, even though you don't really want to get into the residential side, even on an industrial side like this, site like this, you might end up with some residential. Do you understand?
Okay. Yeah, so I can't escape it.
You can't escape it. The reason I like the residential as part of this industrial use is that a site superintendent lives there.
Oh, okay. Manages everything.
And
got it.
A site superintendent is exempted from the RTA. So if you had a site superintendent, which they do have, there's a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor. If you have a site superintendent up there and he's dealing drugs or he's an alcoholic, there's no residential tenancy act. You can go in there and you can march them off the property in 5 minutes. I had one of my, I own a mini storage business, and I had a site supervisor who was stealing.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we had, you know, hundreds of these little mini storage places, and you know, we were always about 92-94% occupied. And then I started to see that the occupancy rate started dropping, and I thought, what the hell? We've got, you know, 25 or 30 units that are vacant, right? And I said to the site superintendent, what's going on? He said, oh, well, you know, the business is down. And I said, well, that's weird. So anyway, my youngest son went and did a count of the locks, and every unit had a lock on it, which meant it was rented. So what he was doing is he was writing leases for people, and they would pay him in cash. So he was stealing probably 30 of them. He's probably stealing $5,000 or $6,000 a month.
Wow.
So I went to see him and I said, you're leaving now, and you just march him right off the site. And I said, I'm not going to dime you out to the police. I don't know how much money you've stolen. You know, you've probably been doing that for 6 or 7 months. You took 30 or 40 grand. I'm not asking you for the money back, but you're leaving now. All right. So, but that's the only experience I've ever had like that. Most people, you know, once you go through the vetting process, you probably won't face that. Maybe I shouldn't have told you that story.
No worries. Is it sorry, just to go back, are site supers excluded from RTA even if it's an apartment building, or is it just like commercial or industrial?
So I don't know about that. I should know that. That's a good question. Site supers are exempt because this is what's called accessory residential.
Okay.
I own another property, another industrial property, where I also have a site superintendent, and you know, it's another mini storage place, and that guy's as honest as the day is long. We've had no theft, no graffiti, no damage, no arguments. It must be 15 years he's lived there. He's a great guy. He takes care of it like it's his own, but it is accessory to the main use. So I know, because I have a legal opinion from my real estate lawyer, Steve Shepard, that in an industrial or commercial situation where it's called accessory residential, that's specifically exempted. So let's say the three of us owned like a 250,000 square foot industrial building with hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in the damn thing. You can't have a site superintendent who's stealing, right? So the RTA is exempt, but I don't know if that applies to
residential complexes. Okay, no worries.
That is a really good question.
I thought I'd just ask and complete the big picture. That's all. Yeah,
no, it's great. So this is a mini storage place, a contractor yard place. It's got the office there, the accessory residential there. It's got an automatic gate. You know, you put your code in, you get in. And I don't know how many RVs and trailers and buses, trucks he's got here, but probably hundreds of them. Lots of sea cans that contractors have put on the site. These are contractor yards. So Ario, these are like fenced off areas where that's your own sort of like private contractor yard. You can sort of see that this guy probably is collecting or selling cars. I don't know. Yeah, another yard here. It's an incredibly busy place. And just so you know how, just out of interest, how he does the leasing is each one of these parking spaces, even where it shows as empty, is actually paid for. So if you come to his yard and you have a boat or an RV or a truck or a bus or something or a sea can you need to park, you have to do a 12-month lease, and it's yours. So if you take your RV or your boat out for 2 or 3 months and you don't show up for the summer, or you don't show up for the winter, that's fine. Still, you're paying for that space.
Yeah.
And you can see all the, I mean, you know, there's lots of contractors who have their stuff in here. And he's put another 500,000 cubic yards of gravel down on this property. You can sort of see that he's going to clear more. He is clearing more land and adding to it. So he bought this particular property, and it goes to your question, Ario. He bought this property and it had contamination on it. All right. And the seller was asking, I think, 1.5 million for 13 acres. And it had that building that I showed you there, and it has a mini storage building, and it had some land, but it didn't look like this. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. And when we did the environmental review, phase 1, and then we did a phase 2. Phase 1 means they just walk the property. Basically, they're looking to see if there's any obvious pollution. They look at the chain of title. They look at aerial photographs going back 100 years. They give you a report. In this case, there was concern that there might be some pollution on this property because of what had happened in the area over the last 100 years. There was a transformer company that had been here, and transformers leak, and that's significant pollution. So we put in some monitoring wells so we could gauge the degree of difficulty. And there was significant pollution on about 20% of the land of VOCs. So what we estimated was that it would cost, I think, $400,000 to remediate the property. So the offer that went in from my client, first name is Peter, to the seller was, I think, $1 million for 13 acres, including some existing infrastructure. And the 400 grand that we deducted, maybe it was 1.1 million, was because of the cost of remediation. And the seller was eager to sell it, and he accepted the offer, and Peter ended up with this property. What we did was we didn't follow the instructions of our environmental engineers, which wanted us to dig up the soil, truck it away, and it was going to cost 400 grand. What we did instead, with the permission of the Ministry of Environment, was we put down, basically plastic sheeting, very tough, thick plastic sheeting in sort of an area like this. And we windrowed the contaminated soil. In other words, we dug it up, but we kept it on site, and we put it in like windrows. They're long things that look like that. And for the next 2 years, every month, except during the winter months, but every month where it was possible to do, Peter would take a backhoe and stir it up, just like you're stirring a pot. And over the 2 years, all of the VOCs, for volatile organic chemicals in that soil, went into the atmosphere, right? And we got the soil recertified by the ministry, and we put it back. Total cost for that was about $65,000 or $70,000, not 400 grand. Okay. So, and this particular site produces a ridiculous amount of revenue. I mean, I won't give you all the details, but Peter bought it for, I think, 1.1 million. It's currently valued well over 5 million. And that's about a 4 or 5 year hold. Now, Peter knows what he's doing. He's an engineer and he's smart. And that's kind of how you can, you can buy property that has contamination if you know what you're doing.
I think the main reason why Ario is asking is because we had the idea of buying contaminated land that nobody wants to buy. Like there's one on Robertson Road, for instance. It's a motel, a car wash, and a mechanic shop, I believe. And it was on 2044 Robertson, I think it was. So that one was contaminated. And the reason why we thought of this as a business opportunity is because A, the sites are really good sites, and B, nobody wants them, and C, we can negotiate a really stellar deal on it. But the challenge is we're not familiar with the contamination level, and we're not sure really what the process is of like getting the property decontaminated. So then the question is, who, like, let's say we have the report, besides obviously going and getting a quote for remedial work, Is there a way to basically look at it outside of the box, or think of it outside of the box and figure out a solution that significantly builds value in the property?
Great question. So you have a coach who's an expert at this. That's a good step.
Thank God.
That's number one. Number two, there are environmental firms, and then there are environmental firms. There's a company called Golder, and their nickname is Gold Diggers. And the reason for that, I'm glad you're laughing. The reason for that is pretty much every report that they do concludes with the same language: more investigation is warranted.
Wow.
And they just, they take their clients for a ride. So
Wow.
It's like any other business. You want to surround yourself with people that you like and trust, that have your best interest at heart, not theirs. Yeah. So I don't use Golder, as you can imagine. I use a firm. It's a national firm called Pynchon. Pinchinchin. And they helped me with the Canadian Tire situation. They helped me with Peter's situation on Barnsdale Road. They've helped me, I don't know, and between me and my clients across Canada, they probably have worked on hundreds of these things. So if you were going to buy something like on Robertson Road, is it for sale now?
Sure it is, but it's expired. But I think they would be willing to sell.
If you're serious about buying it, here's the process that I use. Okay. Number one, I think it has potential. I think about what is the highest and best use for the site, right away. What is my vision? What are the animations? Yeah. What are the revenues that we can generate with the damn thing? What are the changes that we can make? Because if it's just something where you can't add any value, like, what are you doing, right? Yeah. So you think about the highest and best use for the site. And you go, oh yeah, this kind of looks right. And then you look at the asking price and you say, if I believe I sent you both something I wrote, or at least updated very recently, called Going In Cap Rates. Ario, did you see?
8.5%.
Ario, you still there?
Sorry? Yeah. What was the question?
I sent you both something called Going In Cap Rates.
I read the blog. It was about 8.5%, I believe you said that we should be looking for. Yeah.
So Ariel, this is what I sent you guys. Going in cap rates must change. So the way I figure out what to offer on a property is, what can the existing property generate in terms of gross income? I multiply that by 0.66 to get an approximate number for net operating income. And then I divide that by 0.08. And the reason I use 0.08 today, as you know, Armin, instead of 0.06, is because interest rates went from 3 or 4% to 7 or 8%. So if you buy something that has a 6% cap rate, or like we were talking about, maybe 3% in Toronto, and you're paying 7 or 8%, you're just losing money every month. That gets old. That's not really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So here's an example. This was from the home run course that I did. Jessica was a student there, and she was looking at a prospective investment property for her that was for sale with an asking price of 1.6 million. And it was then producing a cap rate based on, not based on what you're going to do in terms of renovations and animations, based on what is already there and existing, right? Was producing 4.8%. So I asked her what she should pay for this property if her target was a going in cap rate of 6%. Well, the answer is easy. You take the asking price of 1.6 million, you multiply by 4.8 over 6, and you get 1.28 million. So that's the advice I gave her like a year and a half ago. But if we were doing the same thing today, I would say, no, it would be 1.28 times 6 divided by 8, or just 960,000. what she would, and that is the maximum price she should pay for that if she's going to get a going in cap rate of 8%. Now, if she animates the property and she moves the cap rate up to 9, 10, 11%, but that's from her own efforts. You don't pay a seller for the future value you're creating. You pay the seller for the value that they have. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at, Ario. And I think I sent that to her. At least if you have
Yeah,
it,
I
right?
see it here.
You should read this stuff. Okay. So what was the question, Armin?
Contaminated sites.
Yeah, so the one on Robertson Road. So, oh yeah, okay. So I had a flu shot yesterday and a COVID shot, and I got a huge headache. So that's my only excuse. Yeah, I got them both because I need that to go to Australia. They won't let you in without an up-to-date COVID.
Wow.
So anyway, so on Robertson Road, you would say, okay, what income do, maybe they don't have very much income.
Yeah.
You want an 8% cap rate, it's easy to figure out what you should offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you would offer is the going in cap rate that gets you an 8% going cap rate. And then you would put in an unknown factor for the contamination. No one knows what that is. You can't possibly know that. So you put maybe just, I'm making up a number. Say you were going to offer $2 million for the property, and that gets you an 8% cap rate. But maybe you assume, just an assumption, that you're going to spend $100,000, fixing the contamination if you can. So maybe you offer 1.9 million. And then you have to, for a building like that, you need at least 45 days for conditions. It's not like buying a bungalow in Barhaven. You could get your conditions done in 7 or 10 days, right? So you need 45 days. And what you would do is you do a pre-consultation with the city of Ottawa. You bring in somebody like Pynchon. Your coach has a look at it. You talk to the Ministry of Environment. And you need 45 days to do that. And what I put in an agreement like that, Armin, is I put in, you got 45 days to do your conditions. And you have, if you need it, you have a second conditional period of another 45 days. Could be 90 days. Okay. And because it takes a lot of time. And you read the environmental report, and then you and I and your brother here would meet with the environmental consultants, and you have to always use your own judgment.
Yeah.
The bad news here, guys, is that you would think that architects, for example, would understand how to add new revenue streams. Unfortunately, I taught 14 years of architecture. They know nothing about animation. You have to know this stuff.
Yeah.
You have to know highest and best use. And when your environmental engineers for Peter's situation said, you got to pull all that soil out and pay $100 a cubic yard to dispose of it, I said, there's no effing way we're doing that. We're going to design a different program. And we did some more research, and we came up with an alternative program. Instead of costing 400 grand, cost 60, 70, 80,000 bucks. So you want to use your own judgment, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So you would make an offer at, say, 1.9 million, assume it's accepted. You would spend your time doing due diligence, which costs a certain amount of money for sure. And then at the end of the 45 days or the 90 days, there are 3 decisions you can make. 1, you like the deal, you're going to close. 2, you hate the deal, you're not going to close, and you get your deposit back. Or 3, you ask for a price abatement.
Yeah.
Said, look, we thought the remediation was going to cost 100,000, but even after doing our very best, it's going to cost 300,000. So instead of paying 1.9 million, we're going to pay 1.7. If the seller says no, then you can say, well, you keep it. Try and sell it to somebody else.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the question is, how do you find out the true cost of remediation? Because I don't think Golder or Pynchon will tell you what the costs are. You have to get a quote of some sorts.
In the case of Golder, you're right. In the case of Pynchon, their engineers are really good, and they'll give you a pretty good estimate. It's just an estimate. It could be wrong. So unfortunately, if you want to do something that's risk-free, you buy US Treasury bills, and they give you about 4 or 5%. The interest now, it used to be 1 or 2%. They get 4. That's the only thing that I can think of that's really risk-free. I mean, maybe there's some equivalent in Canada, I don't know. But there is risk here, but you can de-risk it. When Peter bought that thing, we had a good plan. And it worked out way better than we thought. We thought we would drive the value of the property up from 1.1 million to maybe 2.5 or 3 million in a period of 3, 4, 5 years. And the fact that it's now valued well over 5 million is, that's a pretty, and by the way, he makes from that property, he makes $25,000 a month after paying everything, including his mortgage.
Wow.
And he works 4 hours a day.
That's really good.
I hate him.
So
I work a lot more than 4 hours a day, and I certainly don't make the kind of money he makes. No, I'm big funny, Ario. I mean, he's a coaching client of mine. I love the guy. I'll tell you one last funny story. So I apologize again, Armin. We did not get through your whole agenda.
No, that's fine. I mean, that was pretty much all of the questions we had.
Well, you had a lot more
we threw it.
But we'll get to it'll get better. But let me just tell you, Peter calls me up. This was last year, and he calls me up and he tells me he's making $25,000 a month, and in fact it's higher now because you can see he's expanding. And so it wouldn't surprise me now if it's 32,000 a month in his jeans after paying everything. I said, that's great, Peter. Let's go out and buy another one. And he puts his hands up like this and said, no. I said, no. Because he's doing very well. He's relatively young. He's in his 40s. And he said no. I said, really? Why? Because he loves adventure. Like, he'll go snowboarding and he'll go on incredible adventures around the world. He'll be in Norway one day and somewhere else in Chile the next day or something. I don't know. And he said, look, my wife and I only have one kid, and she's going to college soon. So we'll be empty nesters, and we just want to have fun. We're going to travel and do adventures. And I'm making, last year, $25,000 a month. After I pay off my mortgage, which is almost paid off now, it's got another 4 years to go. It'll jump by 7,000. I'll be making 32,000, and then he's expanding, probably making 40,000 a month. That's plenty of money for me, and I'm good. I don't want to do any more. I like working 4 hours a day. And he said, when you own a mini storage business and a contracting business, you can run it off your phone. Right? People log into his website and they can sign the leases. They put their credit cards in. He has a site superintendent who lives in that one bedroom. If there's a problem, with the gate, the guy will fix it. I mean, Peter, that's it. He can be in Norway and operate the damn thing.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And I said, Peter, I've coached over 2,500 people, and you're the first person who told me no. But I totally respected that, right? I mean, that's what he I've got other young people that I coach, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, some in their 50s, who want to build $500 million businesses. Now that's not a 4 hour a day work day, right? They're working a lot harder than that, but they're much more ambitious. Peter, I'm good.
So I guess if I were to just ask you that one question, is that, so who came up with the out of the box idea to basically, instead of spending 400 grand, to spend 60 and put the, also you came up with it, Pynchon didn't, right?
No, unfortunately not. They did approve it, right? Because I'm a civil engineer, not an environmental engineer, but I know a lot about, because I worked for the New South Wales government. I lived in Australia for many years. I worked for the New South Wales government as a civil engineer, and we dealt with some waste disposal issues which were really difficult in the Sydney metropolitan area. I've been doing this for decades, so I know a lot about it. I know enough to be dangerous, right? But what I'm saying to you is, it's very important to listen to your engineers, listen to the experts, but at the same time, you have to do your own research. You have a coach who knows something about it, but you guys are smart young men. You'll do your own research too. And I have a number of Asian clients who who ask really good questions. They drill down and they drill down and they drill down, and they go over things over and over and over again. And when I first started this coaching practice, I wasn't used to that. And then I realized, as we go through things over and over and over again, we're constantly improving things. The Japanese have a word for it. I can't remember what it is, but it means constant improvement, right? And I learned that from my Asian clients, Japanese and Chinese clients and others, some people from Vietnam and others that I work with, how careful they are on every single decision. And it has made me both a better coach and a better developer. Because I've said to my wife, I could learn something like that. Because Westerners, tend to be, they want everything like that, right? Like I said, 1.5 second attention span. Now, I might be guilty of that too, not anymore. So unfortunately, when it comes to the creativity that you're going to apply to business, it's going to come from you and a very small circle of people that you like and trust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of homework. Like I said, do the your elevator pitch for yourselves. Armin, you can look on LoopNet, Crexi, Kijiji, Craigslist, MLS, Realtor.com, Realtor.ca. Once you figure out what you're looking for, right? You'll find it. But you have to figure out what it is that you want to do. And the people who make the most money in any business, whether you're running Facebook or you're running a real estate company, are people who have a business model that they like and that they become true experts in. So you don't want to, be in the residential space and then the industrial space and then the retail plaza space and then the multi-res, you already know that the residential business is as different from the commercial business as running Facebook is from running a shoe store. It's different. And inside the commercial business, the industrial models that I like are very different. Like if you guys want to buy an office building, I won't help you do that because you're just going to lose money. I won't help you lose money. That I'm not going to do. So I like the industrial space. I love the retail plazas. I like the mixed use buildings like the one I showed you. I like those models. But even within the industrial space or the retail plaza space or the mixed res, there are different models there too. So we have to find a model that you both like and you think will be successful for you, and then you could find maybe the Robertson Road property, and I'll help you with that. One of the things I wanted to show you, because I got to get going here, I got another coaching client I'm talking to at 1:30, but one of the things I wanted to show you, and I will send you some more stuff to read, is where am I? I want to find this. Where is it? I thought I had a deal points memo. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. So I'd like to share with you by email, and I want you guys to read this stuff. You too, Ariel. What I do before I make a formal offer is I put together what I call a deal points memo, and I'll send you this, but this is confidential information. You can't share it with anybody else. Okay?
Okay.
Gotcha.
And if you were going to put an offer in on a property on Robertson Road, I'd want you guys to at least do the first draft of this, and then I'll help you with the second draft. So a deal points memo. This is for a property that he actually ended up buying in Texas. Obviously, you want to know what the offer price is. Are there any commissions payable? Who the buyer is? Who the seller is? Is there a realtor involved? Who are the attorneys? What is the status of the buyer? Are you an American citizen or not? Are there taxes applicable? What is the subject property? What is the legal description? What conditions are you going to put in an agreement? You know what a conditional agreement looks like. Well, this is pretty typical for commercial property financing, economic feasibility, building inspection, legal review by your attorney, a zoning and ordinance review, and environmental. Right? Those are typical conditions, right? How long is the conditional date? Remember, I told you 45 days. But I think in the case of something that's as complicated as Robertson Road, it'd be 45 days plus another 45 days if you needed it, right? You got to have enough time. Closing would be 15 business days after fulfillment of all conditions. Do you want vacant possession or not? What is the deposit? What's the balance? I won't go through this because it'll take too long, and I really got to get ready for my next call. But I'll send you some stuff to read, and Ario, you know, you're a young person. I'd like you to read it, because the objective of this coaching is to make you guys really, truly expert real estate investors. And I think I'm the best real estate coach in the world, to be honest with you. That's what I think. Yeah. And that's not hard, because a lot of the coaching in this business is terrible.
That's why we're with you, no worries.
Yeah, I really think so. But you know, it's like being the tallest midget, right? But I'm really good at it. And if you do the work in a few months, you guys really will be, you can become world-class developers and investors, and I'll help you do that. Okay.
Okay. Looking forward to it.
So you got to do the homework. You got to do the readings. And Armin, I'd like a mid-month report from you within 2 weeks. Right?
Of what we want to do, I guess, like what our niches.
What are your thoughts? What are some of the questions that are coming up? What are some of the obstacles that you're facing? You know, like I ask people, as you know, Armin, I've already said, not to call me every day, because I got 2,500 coaching clients. If they called me every day, I couldn't get anything done. So my clients, they email me. I can handle, you know, 120 emails a day. You'll get the same day or the next day response time from me. If your house is burning down, you're allowed to call me. But other than that, you just email me and I'll respond, because when I email back, I can add all kinds of documentation that you can read, and videos, etc. All right, we've gone a little over time. I'm going to download this video after our call's over. I'll put it on YouTube and I'll send that to you. Be unlisted. You'll have it if you want to review it. And I expect to hear from you. Do not go away for a month and I don't hear from you. All right?
No. I'll send you a mid-month report. No worries.
And anything that comes to Ario, you too. If anything comes up that, you know, so I should ask Prof. Bruce this question. If you think you can save it for the next session, that's fine. Add it to our agenda. But if it's something urgent and important, you just send it to me. See you guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.